Hi, and welcome to She Said, She Said. I'm Laura Cox Kaplan. Today I'm welcoming my good friend Mary Beth Albright. Mary Beth is the video food editor at the Washington Post. She also wears a number of other hats as well. But today, as you can tell, if you're watching this conversation from our YouTube channel, we've actually moved from my living room into my kitchen because we're going to be talking about food. And Mary Beth's going to give us some great tips on things to keep in our pantry, food safety, a number of other topics, which I think you will find really, really helpful and valuable, especially right now. Mary Beth has a tremendous background and expertise in food. She worked for the U.S. Surgeon General's office before getting her law degree, and then she worked in food law as a food lawyer before joining the Washington Post. She is a writer. She's been a food journalist. She's done a number of things, but all around this topic of food and nutrition. So I think you'll really appreciate her perspective and also a bit of her own story related to her career evolution and really reinvention. So with that, Mary Beth, welcome to She Said, She Said.
I have missed you. I'm so happy to see you. And I love that you're in your kitchen.
Doesn't happen very often. No, we did move into the kitchen, especially for you, because we are going to be talking about food.
Oh,
and
thank you.
Your thing, as you know, I'm kind of reluctant in the kitchen a little bit, so you always pull me a bit, kicking and screaming. So, and I'm very grateful. I would love to talk to you a bit about what you're doing at the Washington Post with the quarantine cooking show. What is that? And tell me a little bit about how it came together and what you're trying to do with it.
Well, it's funny because at the Post, because we're a news organization, we're efficient and we're scrappy and we can turn on a dime. And so I think it was the Monday before schools closed here, I said to my executive producer, Michelle Giacone, who is amazing, I said to her, you know, I have this idea that maybe we just do something that's literally just called Quarantine Cooking Show. Because it's not evergreen content. You know, everybody wants to make content that's evergreen, that you can play in 5 years and it's so fun. And I was like, this is gonna be a huge deal. We're gonna be at home for a while. I mean, I had no specific knowledge of that, but it really seemed that way. And because I have a background in public health, I thought to myself, you know, this could be the pandemic that everybody's been worried about. So I pitched it to Michelle on a Monday and we shot our first one on Thursday. School closed on Wednesday and we shot our first one on Thursday. So yeah, I know. So, but it's nice because we can turn them around really quickly, which I have relatives who live in Los Angeles and who work in the film industry and the television industry, and they're really not doing anything right now. I mean, that's like shut down. So it's wonderful to have the resources of the Post and, as I said, the efficiency and the scrappiness. And what I'm trying to do in this is something that I've really worked on my whole career, is that, you know, food pageantry is wonderful. We all love it, right? We all love to see, you know, beautiful plates and be served and listen to chefs talking crap about other people and like that kind of thing. Like, we all love it, right? But you have to eat,
right?
You know, you can't eat a page in a book and you can't eat the television. Yeah. I have tried, I've licked it, but it doesn't work. And so what I really have wanted to do for my entire career in food is do things that are authentic, that I actually do, that I make up at home, and that are not, I mean, I'm a pretty low commitment cook. Do you know what I mean? Like, I have not made a sourdough starter. And if you have, and if you're baking your own bread, amazing, fantastic, do you. But I think there are a lot of people who are underserved by the food media because it's not real cooking. It's not what people do on a day-to-day basis. And we've lost the art of that.
Yeah. Let's give me a few examples. I know we're going to send folks, and we're going to include the link to the quarantine cooking show in the show notes for this episode, of course. But give us a few examples of some of the things that you're talking about, some of the tricks that you're sharing. These are generally fairly short videos so a person can watch them in 15 minutes or less, right?
Yeah, the videos are about 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
Sometimes they're a little less, sometimes they're a little more, but it's very and it's very step by step. And I can give you an example because we just finished filming chicken eggplant parmesan. I don't know if it's gonna
Wow.
look good or not. Yeah.
Yeah. It's fantastic.
And so one of the tricks that I use with this is something, that I don't know that I don't see a lot of microwaves on food shows, right? But one of the great ways to cook eggplant, like sometimes you're looking at an eggplant and you're like, I don't know what to do with you. Because if I chop you up and I cook you in oil, it's going to soak it up and it's going to become soggy and it's going to be terrible for me. And it's only going to taste like the oil. And so, you just don't even buy the eggplant, right? One of my favorite ways to cook eggplant is just to take it and stick a fork into it, 5 or 6 times like you would a baked potato, put it in a microwave safe dish, cover it with plastic wrap, and then just microwave it for 5 minutes. And when it comes out, the skin peels right off. You'll see the water at the bottom of the bowl. So a lot of the water comes out, but the flesh is really creamy. And you could put that on a piece of bread with some cheese and tomato sauce, and there's your eggplant parm. That's very easy. I did a little bit more with it in this, but it's like little tricks like that really make cooking, to me, more pleasurable.
Yeah, absolutely. So talk a little bit about, because I do not have an eggplant on hand, and I'm not sure I could get an eggplant. Maybe I can, maybe I can't, who knows? And people listening, wherever they are, the food availability or the availability of particular items is a bit of a question mark, right?
Absolutely.
So talk about, I know some of the shows that you've done have been based on what items that you're more likely to have in your pantry or in your freezer. Talk a little bit about some of your go-tos. What are the things that we must have? And especially as we think about, heaven forbid, this is going to last a few more weeks, maybe longer. We don't know what the answer to that is. So what should we have on hand and what should we do with it?
A couple of things. First of all, I always give ideas for substitutions. If you don't have something, if you don't have an egg, or if you don't have milk, or if you don't, I did a pasta carbonara, and I was like, look, if you don't have an egg, just use a little cream. You'll make a Parmesan cream sauce. It'll be amazing. When I bring up Parmesan, I'm making a lot with Parmesan because honestly, the harder the cheese, the longer it lasts. And Parmesan cheese has been around since the Middle Ages, well before refrigeration. And, if you have a good hard cheese that can add a little bit of something, right? I wouldn't buy any soft cheeses right now because you just don't know how long they're going to be in the fridge, or whether, you don't want to have to eat cheese really quickly.
And when it starts to get a little green around the edges, you can just shave that off, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
At the,
don't eat it.
Yeah, I mean, you just don't eat those parts, but ultimately what's in the middle is still okay, right?
Totally, yes, it's fine. But some of the things, the pantry items, I did a video about the 10 pantry items you should have. One of them, my favorite, is canned whole tomatoes, because you can do really so much with them, like obviously pasta sauce and that kind of thing. But if you roast them, they turn sweet and caramelized, and you can use those to wake up and brighten up a chili. You can use those to brighten up a soup. I just eat them with pieces of roast garlic and Parmesan cheese as a little snack. Sometimes my son and I sit outside on the porch and just wave to people as they walk their dogs, that's our sort of afternoon snack, so that we don't feel like the entire day is just one long continuum, Frozen berries, I think, are a great thing to have. I did a video with a frozen berry crisp, or really any kind of frozen fruit, because you can make a crisp with almost any fruit. Like if I made one with frozen mango once, because that's all I could find. So any kind of frozen fruit and vegetable. Nuts and nut butters are fantastic because they last for a really long time. You can even put nuts in the freezer. And for one of my videos, I didn't have breadcrumbs, so I made nut crumbs. And you just grind up some nuts in a coffee grinder, and they act as breadcrumbs. And so if you're either gluten-free or you don't want the bread or anything, here's Zelda.
Hi, Zelda.
Hi. So those are really good to have on hand. Salsa, because salsa can also be something that you add. sorry, salsa, because salsa can be something that you add to a lot of different things to make them better. And, in addition to beans, rice, pasta, like the things that are obvious, but I really tried to get, and honey. Honey is to me very important, because if you have one sweetener in the house, if like you can't find sugar or whatever, I mean, you can use honey for almost anything. So yeah, those are just some of the items.
Yeah, I love that. We're going to include a list with the show notes
Right.
and maybe put it in the newsletter this week
Right.
as well, with just some tips. I mean, at this point, people have been going through this quarantine for several weeks, but I think it's nice to just kind of have a refresher on the things you want to continue to keep on hand, just in case, since we don't know how long we're going to be here. So Mary Beth, how about some of your favorite go-to recipes when you just are feeling depleted and food you need is a nice salve to just make you feel better, but you need something that's easy? What are a couple of your go-tos that would be good for people to have?
Okay, so number one go-to is the frozen fruit crisp. I love that because it's fruit. You don't put any sugar into the fruit, right? You just put a lemon over the fruit. And then the topping is basically an oatmeal cookie, but I make it only with whole grains and honey. So there's no refined sugar, no refined flour. And so it's real, and it like you make it with your fingers. You don't need a knife. You don't need a mixer. You can have a kid do it because it's like just soften butter and you just mix it together, right? And it is freaking delicious. And it makes the house smell incredible, because right now it's even when you go outside for a walk to get fresh air, it's nice to walk back into your house. And if you haven't cleaned it in a while, it smell like something good, right? Like food, like something good is happening in your house.
Yeah.
So I do love that. When I make pasta, I usually do, one of my best tips always is save some of your pasta water, because, you can do that with like a Parmesan, like just put a little bit of water into the Parmesan, because the pasta water is both seasoned, as you're salting your pasta water, and it's starchy because all the starch from the pasta is leaked out into the water. And so it gives you a great mouthfeel to just like any kind of little sauce that you're putting together. Like I've done tahini, which is a sesame paste, right? It's like ground sesame.
And you can keep that on hand in a jar, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's another great pantry item to have. To me, it falls under like nut butters, because it's a seed, but it's still like it looks exactly like peanut butter in a jar. So I'll just do some tahini and avocado and some pasta water and mash that up with a fork and maybe put some lemon zest in it. And that's a great, that's a great dinner.
Yeah.
I also, if you know how to make a steak at home, I always recommend ribeye is the best cut to make at home, because making a fillet, it's like a little bit harder because you really you want to overcook it. And with something like flank steak, you have to slice it really thinly, and I don't have the patience for that right now. So I make a lot of ribeye steak. If you don't know how to make a steak, we have a video about that, and it really is super easy. I mean, the thing that you really need is just a meat thermometer, which most people have kicking around in a junk drawer somewhere. So
yeah, and because the weather's getting nicer, if you are fortunate enough to live somewhere where you can have a grill either on a patio or on a porch or your balcony, it's a great alternative to getting the cooking part out of your kitchen. So
definitely, and getting outside.
So let's talk a little bit about pasta. Pasta is a good go-to. It's an easy thing to make, but if you're somebody who has a gluten sensitivity, can you literally substitute any of these other sort of whole grain pasta?
Oh, okay. Sorry. I didn't know if you were talking about like lentil pasta or spelt pasta or black bean pasta. Yeah, absolutely.
But there's like such a wide variety of options. When and how do you know like which ones are good substitutions? Like what's kind of your rule of thumb? I have one that I think it's chickpea pasta, which is pretty good, but it gets soft faster than normal pasta, so you don't cook it as long, but it seems to taste pretty similar. But what's your sort of guideline for using that kind of stuff?
A couple of things. Number one, I mean, the good thing about it is that it's both, like if you use regular semolina or white flour pasta, it's a starch. That's what it is. If you use something like a chickpea pasta or black bean pasta, it's a starch and a protein. So that's sort of good that you're getting both of those things. I mean, my rule of thumb is if you like it, you can use it, right? Because I would absolutely make, yeah, and different brands are of different quality too. Like some of them you eat and you're like, oh my gosh, a witch made this, you know? But some of them you eat and you're like, wow, this is actually not a bad substitute.
Right.
And so like there's a specific, I don't even know what kind it is. I can look in my pantry, but I do keep a black bean pasta on hand for when I want to feel like I'm having a protein and a starch together at dinner, right? If I'm not like, oh, and I want meatballs. And it's just like, I get all these together and it's good. So I'd say try different things out and make sure that you're like also looking for different shapes of pasta, because sometimes if it's like a black bean spaghetti and you're like, I don't really like that, they might make a penne that you might love, you know, that doesn't feel as mushy or sticking together or something like that. So I would definitely go, they don't make as many shapes of black bean pasta as they do of, you know, white flour or semolina pasta, but they will vary, and they'll vary and I think it's a lot of it is just a texture thing, as you're talking about.
Yeah.
Nothing beats a great al dente pasta. And if you feel like you can't get that with a black bean spaghetti or a chickpea spaghetti, you might be able to get it with a different shape.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's really good advice. So I'd love to pivot a bit and take advantage of your incredible knowledge. You know, you came from a background in public health,
Yeah.
studied food safety. You've thought about potentially this notion of a pandemic and what that might mean. Talk a little bit about how people should be thinking about this notion, not even the notion, but the safety of our food source. What should people know? How should they be treating fruits and vegetables when they bring them home from the market? Give us your best.
So when this all first started, there was a study in the New England Journal of Medicine that showed that there were traces of coronavirus, the novel coronavirus. Traces could be found on cardboard, plastic, or steel for differing amounts of times, but it was between 24 hours and 3 days that the virus could be detected. And this caused people to want to leave their groceries outside for 3 days, or sanitize their cans, or wash their vegetables in soap and water. What we know about the novel coronavirus is that it's a respiratory illness, and though it is mainly transferred through droplets, through air droplets. And so it is not efficiently, first of all, there's been no case that has ever been traced to food or packaging. And they're trying to trace these cases pretty well, right? Like how do you go back to it?
Do you think they would know? I mean, do you have confidence that we really know?
No, well, that's why I'm saying this is what we know about coronaviruses generally, is that they're mainly spread through droplets, right? Like the coronaviruses that we've seen before. And any respiratory illness is mainly spread through droplets. So the answer is, of course, no. We don't know. Nobody knows, and that's one of the reasons that what I feel like, and I'm immunocompromised, which a lot of people don't know, and I don't sanitize my groceries or anything like that. What we do need to do is, and we haven't had a lot of experience of this in first world countries, particularly in America. I think we've got to figure out how to measure and mitigate risk, and how to weigh things. And in America, we're not necessarily really good at choosing this or that. We want both, right? Which, you know, is one of the wonderful things that has caused our country to flourish. But it's also, you know, the figuring out what we do know, right? Because there are some things we do know, and making educated guesses based on that about what we need to devote our time to. So, for example, I do not leave my groceries outside for 3 days, or packages or anything like that. I don't disinfect things any differently. I don't disinfect food or packaging any differently. But you've got to remember that, like, you can still get really sick from cross-contamination of foods. You can still, like, you need to disinfecting things all the time, like, disinfecting surfaces all the time, like cooking surfaces that you use in your house all the time. Social distancing, obviously, and wearing face coverings. And when you go to the store or the pharmacy or wherever you have to go, I mean, it's really awkward to stand really far back from somebody and wait for them to get out of the grocery aisle so that you can then go buy them with a 6-foot distance. I mean, it's really awkward, and we're not used to it. And we're not a country that is used to masks or face coverings.
Right.
And so I think, to me, I mean, I'm sorry, this is a long answer to your short question, but I think the thing we need to learn is how to sort through information, figure out what's true, and then base our risk upon that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm doing. And this is something that I studied. I studied lots of public health ethics and food safety when I was in law school. And, the professor back in law school, I actually still have my notes and I look back over them. And he said, we're overdue for a pandemic. The world has not seen a pandemic in almost a century. We live in a global world. I mean, everybody's mixing in ways that we never did 100 years ago. Right. And so, there are a lot of people who have been thinking about risk assessment for a long period of time. I know that was a long answer, but I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, no, it's a great answer, actually. And I was thinking as you were answering my question, for you, as you think about the best sources of information right now, because I do think this is a very difficult thing for people to sort through. There's a ton of information, good, bad, and otherwise, that's available to people.
Yeah.
So what's your best advice as it relates to food and food safety? What are your best resources? What can you recommend for people?
I go to the CDC all the time, and I when I worked for C. Everett Koop, who was Surgeon General in the 1980s, I worked for him in the 1990s, and I worked with Anthony Fauci a lot because they were really good friends, and Fauci was actually Dr. Koop's personal physician from NIH, back when he was being confirmed in the early 80s. And it's funny because in Dr. Koop's memoir, which was written decades ago, he says, when I was talking to Anthony Fauci said, boy, I hope you get confirmed by the Senate and they don't politicize health, because I want to do what you're doing 40 years from now. And if I can't do that and talk about real science, I need to get out of the government. And it's in his memoir.
That's amazing.
It is amazing. I tweeted it like a month ago. I don't even remember that was relevent. I don't.
Yeah. No, it's completely relevant, and it's a great data point. But I had asked you you said the CDC was your go-to resource for information, sort of, other places where people should be going, what they should avoid, and what they should be looking for as it relates to information about food safety.
Yeah. So I know we're talking. I recommend the CDC, right? And if you go to the CDC's website and the FDA's website, you will see what I really appreciate about it is that they have it in a timeline. So they say, this is what we said on March 27th. This is what we said on March 28th. This is what we said on April 3rd. So you can see that there's a continuity there.
Right.
So that you're not thinking to yourself like, well, did that change? You can actually go back and look for yourself and see all of the statements that they have made about what they know about this coronavirus. So that's why those are the places that I really go.
Yeah.
And those are the only places that I go. I mean, I'm on the Washington Post website all the time and looking at our reporting. And I feel as if those couple of sources is really where I'm getting my information from. I mean, not to plug my company, but there are people who are I'm on a 9:00 phone call every morning to talk about the news and what we're covering that day and that kind of thing. And what people are doing and pursuing is extraordinary in any time. But right now, like, the major newspapers are doing incredible reporting on coronavirus. And it's something that makes me really happy, honestly.
Yeah. Well, you're sort of alluding to some of the other elements of your job. You have the food video editor piece of your job, but that's just one piece. You're also interviewing influencers in the food space, the movers and shakers. You're looking at food safety. You're doing a lot of other things. Talk a little bit about the other elements of your job and how it all comes together.
Well, it's interesting because the Independent Restaurant Association the Independent Restaurant Association today is doing a phone call with a lot of people across the country who own restaurants,
Oh,
right? And but who own small restaurants, like not big corporate restaurants. There's nothing wrong with them, but it's like what's going to happen in the restaurant industry after this is after this is over, right? And there are some estimates that 75% of restaurants will not reopen after this is whatever over is, right? And so that is a huge part of the economy that might be just gone. And it's a huge part of the economy that employs people who are extraordinary in what they do, but may not have a lot of translatable skills
right.
To other places. And so a lot of the raise in unemployment you see right now is that it's just restaurants shutting down, or closing temporarily, which might not be temporarily. So we're doing a lot of that. There's coverage there are some major chefs who are trying to sue, who tried to collect insurance because of the pandemic, and were turned down by their insurance companies. So they're suing the insurance companies. So that's a really interesting story. Yeah. Whatever opinion you have of it.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot going on. There's also like the food resources that are available for people. All the kids who had, free school breakfast, free school lunch, who don't have those anymore. We need to feed people. And so where do those kids go? The number of people who are going to food pantries has increased, not yet exponentially, but like by almost 100%. So there's a lot of food insecurity out there. And that is an immediate problem, but it's also a long-term problem, because once you become in any way food insecure, that food insecurity can become a trigger for you, and it can cause all kinds of eating disorders, right? And then that becomes a larger public health problem. And so, I mean, food is so fundamental to everything we do every single day. And I think we're all remembering that now, and, watching the food supply. And I don't believe there's any problem with the food supply right now. And I've looked at this. I think that we don't know what's coming a year or two from now, right? Because what's going to happen with the people the crops that need to be planted now, and I think there's a ripple effect that might happen, but I'm not worried about it in an immediate sense.
Yeah, I mean, there is so much to be, so much of this is incredibly unsettling. We don't have answers. We don't know for sure. We don't know how all of these various things that you've just outlined will play out. It's really, really disconcerting. At the same time, there are so many people that are doing incredible work and stepping up. There are restaurants that are managing to keep their doors open, who are doing amazing things. And I know you guys have been covering those stories as well. Maybe talk a little bit about some of the just incredible, inspiring things that you're seeing in the food world happening right now.
Well, I mean, a few things. First of all, Jose Andres opened World Central Kitchen in National Stadium, because there's no baseball, which might be the worst thing that's ever happened to my child.
I know.
I know.
I'm sorry.
But you know what we're going to do starting on May 24th? We're going to relive the Nationals climb to the World Series, because that's when they turned it around. So we're going to watch the games again starting, May 24th from 2019. We're going to start watching it in 2020. So, but we're not going to do it until like the season started picking up, right?
I'm going to connect you with someone in my house who would really
Perfect. So their World Central Kitchen, which is, there was some chatter last year about Jose Andres being nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. It didn't happen last year. I think it's going to happen. If it's not the Nobel, it's going to be sainthood, right?
Yeah.
But so he's feeding people. Anybody who shows up gets a plate of hot food, and it doesn't matter what you look like or where you're from or whatever. The other thing I'm really impressed by is restaurants that are pivoting. So and I'll bring up Jose Andres again, two of his restaurants, quick, fast casual restaurants, one of them is Beefsteak, which is like a vegetable forward restaurant. They're selling their ingredients. So like if you can't find fresh broccoli or you can't get an Instacart slot or whatever, you can go to their website and order for delivery or pickup already chopped, pre-chopped vegetables, which honestly is something that I would have loved from restaurants, anytime in my life, like having somebody prep those vegetables and bring them to my house. Are you kidding me? Like what restaurants use. There's also Baldor, which is one of the big companies that serves restaurants, ingredients, food products. They're now doing direct to consumer and delivering to people's houses. So there's been a lot of pivoting that I find really inspiring, that restaurants are able to do this so quickly. Because a lot of people who work at restaurants, that's where they eat too.
Right.
They do like a family meal. And so I think, as I said, there's so many ripple effects that people are feeling that we haven't necessarily seen or ingested yet. There are a lot of people who are stepping in to serve those needs, which is really inspiring.
It really is inspiring. You and I were talking about before we started, we both have sons who are exactly the same age. They're both 12 and in the 6th grade. And we were talking about this notion of grit and how going through something like this is really illustrating that in a much more sort of direct way than they might have been exposed to before. And frankly, many of us are feeling that as well. As you think about, you were talking about these restaurants that are pivoting and people that are, they're out of a job and may not be trained to do something else. How do you think about this notion of making that pivot, digging deep, figuring out what really, how do you do that in this environment? It's scary as all get out. You don't know what you're going to do. You got to feed your family. Like, what are you seeing that sort of, this question's I'm all messed up here.
No, of course, like that's what we're all doing right now. I mean, first of all, I think it's important to remember that like pivoting is something we're all going to have to do because the world is going to look different, right? So, reinventing or whatever you want to call it, we're all going to have to do that. I also think very strongly, look, I'm healthy and employed. That's amazing, right? And so I'm not going to pretend that I understand the experience of people who right now are not healthy or not employed, but I can say that I've had a lot of curveballs in my life, and I know that character is built when you're down.
Right.
Character is built when you go through difficult situations. And the great thing about it is that character is also revealed when you're not in a bad situation anymore. And you're like, oh yeah, so I really feel like I'm healthy and employed, but I've had a lot of stuff happen to me up in my life. And I can empathize with people who are not in that place. And I think that the thing to remember is this is, you can't be brave without being scared, right? You can't there's no reason to be brave if you're not scared. And we're all a little scared right now.
Right.
All of us. And that's fine. And I have conversations with my child about it too. I don't know what I'm doing as a mother, but I think that talking about what you're feeling and welcoming any feeling that comes is important.
Yeah. When you think about sort of best and worst as it relates to this experience, we talk about this fact in this house, in the Kaplan household, all the time.
Yeah.
Sort of how will we look back on this experience, good, bad, and otherwise? From your perspective, and maybe from your son's perspective, what do you think your sort of best and worst are going to look like looking back? And maybe things that, said another way, maybe things that you hope you will continue to do that maybe you hadn't done before.
I mean, it's a great question. I look back on my calendar from February. I had to do some expenses. So I went back and I looked at my calendar from February. And I was like, holy moly, this is a really busy life.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't occur to me at the time that it was a really busy life. Like I know, like, oh, my son plays 3 spring sports, and oh, but he's active and that's great. And, then he goes to tutorial and then he, all this stuff. And that's not my natural state. My natural state is sitting on the porch and waving to people as they walk by. and I think I had forgotten that, honestly. And I love doing that. And sometimes there's wine involved and sometimes there's not, it depends on the night. I don't know if that's going to translate to, next year when baseball's back up or when hockey is back up or lacrosse or, but I enjoy, obviously everybody has their moments, but I enjoy a peaceful life.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm remembering that right now. And there's lots of ways to be really productive in the world while living a peaceful life.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really want to keep that.
Yeah. We were having this, as I told you, we were having this conversation here. And I asked our son, Ben, what he's going to remember. And one of the things that we had done as an activity over the weekend was to clean his room, all 4 of us. His sister too. And
What did
he's
you
like
find?
a house in there.
What did you find?
It's true. Oh my God. It was a nightmare. Because I had been like, I just had to close the doors. In any event, like we had so much fun together because we laughed. And we were joking and we were making fun of each other. And Joel taught Ben to clean the toilets, which he had apparently not ever done before, which was a huge deal. Joel with his Marine training, right? Teaching our son to clean the toilets.
Oh my God, a Marine cleaning a toilet? That's intense.
Teaching another Marine to clean the toilet, right?
Yeah.
So it was really funny. And Ben said, I loved laughing. We were all laughing and doing something that, made my room better, but it was really fun to be together and doing this. And I know it sounds sort of silly, but it was kind of magical. And so there are these moments that are, superimposed with all of this stuff that you can't think too far ahead, but it's kind of incredible. So.
Yeah. And I love the word he used was fun. Like, remember fun? And there's a lot of fun to be had no matter what you're doing. And a lot of joy and a lot of celebration. Like today, Truman and I called it our quarantine anniversary because it's day 50 since school closed. So we're going to do something to celebrate. It's our 50th quarantine anniversary. There's always something to celebrate.
Yeah.
There's always something.
I think it's so important to look for those moments and really try to make them special because it does get pretty monotonous at times.
Yeah. And Truman had a birthday when this first started. He had his 12th birthday. And so I did something called Pizza Sled where we invited people over and I ordered 5 different kinds of pizza from different places around town to see which was the best, and we just put it on a sled and would send the sled over to other people so that we didn't have to get involved with other people. So, yeah, Pizza Sled was exciting. I told him for his 21st birthday, we'll do Tequila Sled. And Ben's invited.
Oh, great.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I love it. Mary Beth, I love seeing you, Zooming with you today. You are amazing. You're a tremendous resource and you're just an incredible human being. So I really appreciate you joining me today.
Laura, I miss you. Let's meet up as soon as we possibly can.
I would love that. Love that. I'll see you soon.
Okay, bye.
To learn a bit more about Mary Beth Albright, check out the show notes for this episode. I will include links to the quarantine cooking show on the Washington Post website, along with a few photos and some other things that I think you'll really enjoy. I hope that you appreciated and get some value from all of these great tips and suggestions. Mary Beth is a tremendous source of knowledge on the topic of food, and she's just great fun. So I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. Be safe and be well.